Of us that were involved in the thing, including the video, every one of us is going to do 20 plus years in the military in very responsible positions. So I'd say the world needs to know that. It's not a joke.
Stated earlier, do we have the bodies of the pilots who piloted this craft?
As I've stated publicly already in my News Nation interview, biologics came with some of these recoveries, yeah.
Were they, I guess, human or non-human biologics?
Non-human, and that was the assessment of people with direct knowledge on the program I talked to that are currently still on the program.
And was this documentary evidence, this video, photos, eyewitness? Like, how would that be determined?
The specific documentation I would have to talk to you in a skiff about.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay. So, and you may or may not be able to answer my last question, and maybe we get into a skiff at the next hearing that we have, but who in the government, either what agency, sub-agency, what contractors, who should be called into the next hearing about UAPs, either in a public setting or even in a private setting? And you probably can't name names, but what agencies or organizations, contractors, et cetera, do we need to call in to get these questions answered, whether it's about funding, what programs are happening, and what's out there?
I can give you a specific cooperative and hostile witness list of specific individuals that were in those.
And how soon can we get that list?
I'm happy to provide that to you after the hearing.
Super.
We've all seen this performance before when presenting Congress with the alien UAP disclosure. Mr. Grush is asked if bodies came with this craft, and he answers yes. Some biologics were recovered, and he's then asked if they were human or non-human biologics. His answer was a resounding non-human. He then was asked what specific documentary evidence was used to record this, videos, photos, or eyewitness, and Mr. Grush explains regarding the specific documentation he would have to speak to Congress in a skiff about. Speaking words while explaining nothing to your audience and presenting no actual evidence is a true art, and one that really must be respected. One logical answer for the lack of transparency may be for us all to have to accept incidents like these presented from various prestigious sources discussing humans being abducted for alien biological testing, which yields a victim no less than a minimum of lifelong post-traumatic stress disorder to a maximum of PTSD, also including some terrifying physical side effects from their tests.
Or non-human technology and or beings that has caused harm to humans.
What's your reaction to what Jake describes there?
Well, it seems to be that he was in contact with some type of energy, we might say, with that left a medical footprint on his body. And that's not something that you can manifest in your head. So obviously something actually did happen to him. You can question that something did. And there was a lot of other things that happened to him during that period that he narrated, that in his narratives, that led me to believe that, what he was very earnest about this. So I believe this actually did happen to him. There was nothing construed. And to have those things happen is very similar to other types.
What would cause, for example, skin to literally heal off somebody's body? What kind of exposure for it?
So sometimes radiation, if you ever have any problem with your skin, radiation may do magnetic electrons. So they actually shoot electrons into your skin. You get very, very localized radiation deposits into your skin, which would cause it to have local lesions on your skin. And sometimes you get enough of it, and it will start separating from the dermis. It'll start actually separating and coming and peeling off. And I've had many patients describe this, show this, and talk to medical doctors. And actually, this was something that was pretty prevalent when people actually came into contact with dangerous type of objects.
The other thing that Jake described were lesions on his body. Have you had that experience yourself with witnesses and other experiences who've been exposed to anomalous?
Sure. Yeah, so what happens is that as your body absorbs this energy, it actually does something to it. So your DNA absorbs it. It actually will affect your DNA. It'll break it apart and turn it into almost like a cancer type of thing, where it'll actually have a reaction. So you'll get the dimples, you get the bubbles. It'll almost look like a herpes, but then when they look at it and they actually biopsy it, it's not a herpes. So you'll get these lesions on your skin. Luckily, most of these things dissipate after maybe a week or so. But sure enough, there's a lot of people that have reported that they get these lesions. And, they're, of course, very frightened. Nobody wants to have these things.
Sure. There's a few photographs that you very kindly sent us before we went on air. Can you talk to those? What do they show?
So those are instances where people have, first of all, witnessed something anomalous. Like they looked up in the sky, there was something floating by, there was an orb, there was a UFO craft. They were never alone. Most of those people were not alone. Other people seen it, but these particular people came back like a day or two later, or actually 24 hours later, and started developing these bubbles on their skin. So these areas, these blotchy areas that have these pimply areas, almost like they very, very locally burned or actually had a radiation treatment very locally. And then, of course, that led to discolored urination, all the signals that you get, or all the symptoms you get when you have exposed or absorbed some type of radiation. One of the things that are very interesting, and he talks about, is heart murmur. One of the interesting things that happens when you have an interaction with these entities, and you have this energy that's coming from them, your body reacts in a very, very sinister way. You get into a fight flight type of thing where your immune system kicks up, your capillaries shrink, so your blood pressure goes up. Then you start getting into this whole autoimmune reaction. And when you get an autoimmune reaction and your body's trying to fight something, it doesn't know what it is, because it can't understand what this energy or this thing is coming into your body. But it could affect your autoimmune responses, affects your heart valves to the point where after a certain period of time, they could develop a murmur. So when I heard that, I said, yeah, that's definitely, because then I said, at this point, he definitely got something into his body that that body just did not understand, and it caused this reaction. So that's when I said that's pretty genuine what's happened to him.
Wow, so you've seen these heart murmurs before?
Yeah, we have several people that actually went away. In fact, there's a great study.
So what happened to you?
We're not quite sure. We were transporting HVTs.
High-value targets.
High-value target, which are, at this time, was a large sealed container. I'll tell you, I was near the continent of Africa. And after this particular mission, me and everyone on my team got extremely sick.
How sick?
Like physically ill in the hospital. Within, weeks after this, I'd lost every hair on my body, which they call an alopecia, migrating alopecia. And I also lost the skin on my arms.
So the skin's actually falling off your body?
Yeah, like not just falling off, like it was lopping off within a couple of days, like a severe sun. This led to a series of all kinds of other, what I have learned since being with Dr. Nolan, is autoimmune issues. I ended up developing a severe heart murmur that I'd never had before, which is the same thing that John Burroughs had. And throughout my career, I would have reoccurring autoimmune dysfunction when exposed to other things. I ended up recovering from that at the time, and because of the nature of my work was classified, the VA was only dealing with symptomology, not causation, in the treatment of my injuries. And I didn't even really understand that it was radiation.
So were you treated for radiation poisoning?
No, I was not.
Are you being now?
No, I'm not being treated now for radiation poisoning.
But you're being investigated for what sounds like a radiation exposure.
Yeah, because I had other occurrences later in my career after 9/11 when I left my enlisted capacity and went to work as a contractor. I've had other episodes where I've had other illnesses, and I've lost the hair on my body and patched out several times. And I'm getting treatment through the Palo Alto VA under the supervision of Dr. Gary Nolan right now, and he's dedicating his expertise and his clout to get me the best treatment I can get.
Now, Professor Gary Nolan is one of the world's top immunologists, hugely respected scientist who has, as I understand it, he's spoken publicly that he's been involved in a program for an intelligence agency investigating Havana syndrome.
Yes.
So does it give you some comfort that you're now getting the medical help that you should have got all those years ago?
Hell yeah, it does. And plus, he's got the best bedside manner I've ever experienced. So.
Let them lock in on Homer, and they find the bad guys, and you get your little girl back. So, now, I'll tell you this. If you don't support and let people like us get into the commercial market of that I damn guarantee is going to happen. You will have a federal injunction that will come on that technology, and only the federal system will be able to use that. And if you don't have a commercial competitor out there the opposite the governmental side, you're wide open for Big Brother to go ahead and stamp you like a cow. Now I want to tell you something else. Well, I have, you know, it's such an irony. Do you know what law Hillary Clinton specializes in? Children. She is a child lawyer. She represents children rights. She's a children rights lawyer. Now, let me ask you a simple question. Check this out. Call this 1-800 number for missing National Center for Missing and Abused Children. 50,000 kids disappear every 12 months in this country. That's 5 children per hour. Aren't y'all worried about that? Aren't you concerned? Don't you want to know where they're going? Well, you're not going to find out if you're sitting in here doing nothing. So somebody builds a system where we can find out where they're going. Now, we know that about 35-40% are stolen by the other parent. Okay, fine. Now you got 25,000 missing without a trace. It's been going on for 10 years. That's 250,000 kids gone. And adults as well. I want to know where they're going. I'm going to find out. And I'll do it with state rights. I'll do it with the state of Florida. So I'm not going to wait for permission from the feds. Now, another thing about the missing children is that if you let that system go on, you'll find something else interesting. Not just America, but every country on the planet's got the same problem. And the numbers are just as big, even larger in third world countries. That's mind-boggling, y'all. It took us 14 years to kill 50,000 people in Vietnam. You lose that many in 24 months without a trace. That's insane. And how you think you don't pay much attention, or you pay a lot of attention? Well, let me tell you about a little survey that a friend of mine, he's 8 years old, and he did a science project. He made a picture of himself, put it on his poster, hung it on the mall, and it said, "This child is so-and-so and came up missing." And then if you read down to the bottom, it goes, "I'm standing over here on the right. Come over and talk to me." He stood there with his little clipboard watching people, and out of every 100 people that came through the doors, only 3 would read the message. 3% would take time to look. Something wrong here, y'all. So, I'm just out to try to straighten some of this out with a technological system. And it's kind of a neat karma to it. We build it for a military system, and we turn around and use it to save kids. Kind of neat, isn't it? 91. It started in 91, but the original design, 1975. No. It was still locked up in the military system. It still hasn't gotten into all the commercial aircraft systems. It's just now starting. They've got, I don't know if you've been reading some articles, Time Magazine's transportation system that's been a little bit neglected in the FAA. So all of a sudden this technology became real handy. Now, that's the Navstar system. It'll affect all kinds of industries and stuff in your life. Now, I mentioned to you that it will change a consumer part, this grid will. How so? Well, imagine this. In the very near future, and old Bill Gates, and I agree with Bill on something, that's less than 10% of the system up for you to use. But when we cross over to this like 30-40% of this grid, you're going to have an interesting little bit of technology to fool with. You turn on your TV set, and in the rooms of your house, you have these funny looking little tripod looking things that will be in each corner. And you can have your house, when it's originally built, with a special reflective material. And what happens, you turn on television. Let's say you're watching Jurassic Park or another sequel. And all of a sudden, your entire house turns into a holographic jungle. So real, you believe you're standing there. Holodeck of Star Trek is what's happening in your house. You put these devices all over your house. Why would you want to do that? Well, let's say a velociraptor comes running through the room. It's chasing the main star in the movie. They run back to the back of the house. You get out of your chair and you run with them. Interactive television. That's going to be pretty neat. But I can see problems. Somebody's getting a drink in the kitchen, walk out, and a velociraptor's come running at them. They drop dead of a heart attack. Yeah. So may have sometimes realism is too real. These are a type of products that will be coming. It'll be holographic, three-dimensional virtual reality right in your living room throughout your house. That's just one little toy you can play with. Now, let's talk about space industrialization. And the reason we want to go out there is zero gravity and total vacuum. I'm going to just jump around this program a little bit because we got a tremendous amount of stuff to cover. And I know there's going to be a lot of questions about a lot of things. So the reason we want to go out in space and do this type of research is because of what we're going to learn and the things we've already learned. I'm going to, I'll back up to one here. That's a beam extender. We got to build a lot of big devices out there. So the beam extender is a thing that comes out of the cargo bay of the space shuttle, rolls out this sheet metal that looks like rolls of toilet paper. That's not what they are. And they pull the sheet metal off and flash weld it in place and move from a raw product to a finished product that looks like a telecommunication tower. Now this machine can do it at 5 feet a minute. That didn't impress you, huh? Okay. All right, let me give you an example then. Here's the Seattle Space Needle Tower in Seattle, Washington. That thing is 500 feet tall, weighs 8,660 tons, and it took 50 men working 6 months around the clock to build this tower. With that beam extender, we can build a tower 160 feet taller than this tower, but I don't need 50 men in 6 months. I can do it with 2 astronauts in 3 hours. Ooh, heavy metal. Okay, that got you. Why do you want to build something so big and so fast? Well, we have customers. And this customer right here needs this grid built. And let's see if you can guess the name of the customer. Its competitors are MCI, Sprint, and Skyline. Yeah, gee. Well, actually it's Ma Bell, AT&T. Let's say we have Columbia and Discovery working on this grid. And when they're through, there's a space shuttle at the bottom. This grid will be 1/2 mile across when we complete it, and we'll push it 22,300 miles out to a geostationary position orbit. What does geostationary mean? Well, first of all, we use big words in science that means very simple things, and we do that for job security. The satellite will actually turn same speed the Earth turns, so it can focus 24 hours a day on one spot. In this case, it'll be the continent of North America. Once this grid turns to cell phone, then you're going to buy yourself an interesting looking dial face wristwatch. And you guessed it, that's your telephone now. Well, not a big jump. We went from your belt to your wrist. But there's more. That's also a 200 Pentium computer. It's also a GPS global tracking system. So we can find you if you're injured out there being a big bad hunter and you shoot yourself, I'm hurt out here. Find where you're laying within a few feet. Pretty handy. I will tell you from personal experiences, this thing can lock on you in your position and tell a precise time. And I can tell you that personally that can sometimes be really not good, but that's your problem. We're just building a system. You can figure that one out yourself. Now this is not what it looks like. You step on the foot and the lid opens. That's not a space trash can. Okay, that's a Hubble telescope. And just recently, it was the next thing to a space trash can. So, yeah, NASA loves me, don't they? So, well, why is the Hubble telescope so important to you? It's because of its technological capability. It can really tell us things that can rattle you a little bit. Well, how so? Well, this thing's optical powers are so powerful since it only has a 100-inch mirror lens, which is half the size of the largest ground-based telescopes in the world. But because it's outside this blue Earth atmosphere, it's like sliding a steamy shower door out of your eyes. And this thing now has approximately a 7-dimensional gain and 50 times the power of the largest ground-based telescopes on Earth. Well, why is that so important to you? Well, imagine this. One day you turn on the telescope and you got this thing that looks like National Enquirer on the Wall Street Journal and it says contact with another world, because you could do a visual contact if they tell you, but that would pop your cornflakes surely when you're eating that, looking at the Wall Street Journal. Now, what's interesting about the telescope is some interesting little oddities. Guess where the command center of this telescope is? People think, well, NASA, they would think Washington, D.C., Houston, JPL. No, the control center of this telescope is in the center of Johns Hopkins Medical Center. Why is that? Because a private contractor runs this telescope. Don't get into the word game NASA wants. They say they're privatizing the space program. It's not what you want. You want commercializing the space program. Privatize means they get a private contractor in there, and you know what he's got as a clause? He does not have to show you what he sees for 6 months. You paid $1.5 billion for that thing, and it's 6 months before they even show you what it sees. I don't know about y'all, but I'm a little perturbed about that. So I'm ranting and raving to Congress about it to get that policy changed. So why is this so important? Well, first of all, let me tell you what it has shown us. Do you know there are now 150 billion known galaxies, thanks to the Hubble. There are 100 billion stars in each one of those galaxies. It's 100 billion times 150 billion. Each of those stars have solar systems, which have maybe 10 to 15 planets. And each of those planets, some of them may have 15 to 20 moons. Add all this up, and what number do you come up with? The same number that is the number of all the grains of the sands of the deserts and the oceans on the planet Earth. Now, let's do a little statistics. If you take 1/10 of 1/100th of 1/1,000,000th of 1% and say they're like this, guess how many planets you've got that looks like Earth? 100 million populated planets. Statistically, what do you think the odds are that somebody's out there? Jimmy the Greek wouldn't touch you with a 100-foot pole. So, the Hubble telescope could one day turn its lenses on, and if they decide to tell us and be truthful, we might be staring at something like that. Another civilization on another planet. So, I will kind of go back and forth on all this. You might wonder what life was like for me as a child, since I learned to do all this stuff. A lot of you heard me on Art Bell, right? Oh, God, I see people grinning and laughing. Yeah, we know about that. So anyway, I've never met or talked to Art Bell in my life until night for last. I didn't know what to expect. I know that he had a big broadcasting band, but my God, we got phone calls from Australia. And I'm going, oi. So Art has a pretty good following, about 30 million. So I thought I'd be on there about 5 minutes. I was there from 10 in the evening until 3 in the morning. And in between commercials, I went, can I go home? Finally, I fell asleep, and Art, David. Yeah. So if I sounded a little tired at the end, and you were lucky you even heard me. But Art, he's a character, man. He had to ask all kinds of questions. So what was life like for me when I was growing up? Well, let me kind of give you an idea. The first rocket I built, I was 12 years old, the one that I launched, the very first one. The engine is a liquid-fueled type rocket. It has little cryogenic pumps in it where we're pumping a fluid 400 below zero. Okay, can you imagine handling that stuff? So you might heard on our belt, well, how did you have such access to things? Well, my dad worked for a guy named Lee Petty, and he has a son named Richard. I don't know if you ever heard of these guys. No? Well, yes, Winston Cup about 100 times. They're the most famous race car drivers on Earth, and they drive these stock cars. And my dad worked for them about 20 years. So they had state-of-the-art high-performance machine shops, bigger than this. And if you knock all the walls out in this building, it's twice the size of this building. So huge machine shops, and these machine shops are built for one thing. What? Speed. So I'm looking at all this, and I'm 12 years old. My dad's having me overhauling 426 Chrysler Hemis. I could overhaul one of them things in 3.5 hours. Talk to a garage next time. Well, this guy can do them in 3 hours. It'll be 3 weeks, buddy, before we can get your car back. So we could do everything fast, but I could really do these engines with 2 4-barrels on these engines. turned 675 horsepower. Pretty big engines. And I'm 12 years old and I'm learning to do that. And the Honer weighs more than I do to get them in blocks. That's how can you end up something like that. So anyhow, during the day I was working these things and everybody goes home. And what do I have laying there as far as the eye can see? All these presses and lathes and machines, which I now know how to run. Also, the fuels in this building. They have things called fuelie, drag racers. We have methane, nitro, liquid oxygen, liquid hydrogen. We have kerosene. We got gasoline. I mean, man, basement farmer dream. I can do anything in here. So the petties let me work in there, and they said, "Whatever you do, Dave, don't blow up the place, okay?" So I built my first rocket, and I took it home, and it was about this tall. And I set it up in the backyard. My little friends come over. We're all 12-year-old kids stand there. Now, most of us aren't even allowed to play with matches. Okay, I don't need a match, believe me. So all my friends have never seen me launch anything. They hear me talk about it and stuff. I said, "Well, build this thing." So they're standing there, and they're looking for a 4th of July rocket. That's it. I backed everybody up, and we backed up about the length of a football field. And they're going, "You're kidding." I said, they stand this far when they light a little bottle rocket and watch it go. I said, "I don't think you guys want to be standing that close when this thing goes." So they kind of know I'm strange anyhow. So they get behind trees and stuff like that. And I light this thing, and I do it remote control, wireless, just poof. When I hit a detonation, it goes off. It leaves the backyard, y'all, 3,500 miles an hour. Burns a hole the size of this room in the yard. Down to the roof. Thank you. I turned around and looked at my friends, right? Nothing but dust and little particles in the air like a cartoon. It's ping. My mother comes running out of the house. This thing you can hear 4 miles away. She runs out there and she looks at the yard just incinerated, smoking. So she sees this white thing going straight to the sky, and she just goes. And I'm standing there looking at her, and I go. So my mom looks back at me and she goes, "Where's your friends?" And I went, "Somewhere in the next county by now." I didn't see them for a week. They told me I was going to be beaten to next week. But anyhow, that thing's still huffing and puffing. The altimeter I had hooked onto it, 120,000 feet. That's ionosphere, folks. That's the last band of layer of atmosphere on the planet. It's about to go space out of my backyard. So I had it timed where it could come back in, delayed charge. I was counting the seconds like that, and then the wind shift and drift, and finally it comes back into sight. Parachutes come out, and the thing just starting to drift down, and I walk about from here to the back door and just catch it, and I had to let go of it real quick. It was so hot. But so while I'm standing there, we're watching it float back down to me, and I asked my mom, I said, "God, I am so weird. I'm not like everybody else. What is this?" And she looks at me and she goes, "Well, I'll tell you something. You didn't come from me, you came through me." It wasn't until 30-some years later with the metaphysic crowd that I figured out what my mom was trying to tell me. So, and then I was really worried. So, that was the first time we built a rocket. So you ask, well, how do you know how high up it went? It's real simple. You take a protractor. You ever seen them things, little half moon thing? You glue it to a board. You take a stick this long, screw it into the board, put 2 little eyelets on it, look through it like a rifle, and follow the rocket. You measure 500 feet from the pad to cosine, and trigonometry and table is cosine 1. Multiply that by 1 times 500, and then you get the reading off the protractor. Figure that into the calculation. Do your second clocks, and guess what? Altitude and speed you have in your hand. Now, the reason I make that point, it cost me $5.30 to make all this. NASA had the same thing at $12 million. And we both get the same accuracy. So, talk about overkill. On what? That's it. Well, you got to pay all these guys when you have 5 people sharpening pencils, you know, at $40 an hour. So anyhow, that was the beginning of everything, and the rocket took off. Well, my mom and dad figured, it's time. My dad was practical, although he was. I was born in West Virginia. I was born in number 10 Pocahontas coal fields. I'm about 15th generation coal miner son. Glad to be a coal miner son. Anyway, so anyhow, my dad was a functional leader. He only went to 5th grade, but boy, he could build engines. So he also a very clear thinking person. First thing he did after he came home, he saw the yard, and then he walked over to me and said, "I guess you don't want to mow grass too much, do you?" And he asked me, he's very quick to the point, "Where did you assemble and prep this thing?" And I went, "In the basement." He goes, "Uh-huh." So first thing Dad did, we got up early next morning and everything was moved out of the basement to about 500 yards away to this big old service station we used to have. And he set a huge machine shop up in there for me so I could use. So he told my mother, he said, "Well, Vanjie, if he blows up this time, he won't launch the house with us in it. The building will disintegrate. We'll just put a big stone over there. This is David, our son, who used to be here." So my dad was pretty cool. But now I had a big machine shop, and I mean, it had a full bathroom in it and a little bed area. And I lived there. Did not live with my parents. I lived in this place. And I'm 12 years old. I'm odd, y'all. So I started building these rockets, and the rockets got bigger, bigger, and faster. And I was all the time calling FAA for flight tables. You know why I'm doing that? I don't want to go punching a hole in the belly of an Easterner, airliner going over. So at the time where everybody's at in the sky and go, boom, shoot these things up to it. And FAA people going, "What is this weird blip on the screen?" Nothing moves 4,500 miles an hour now, Some kind, and at that time, in the late 60s, UFO flap, like some kind of UFO, look at that, boom. But, and it was irregular. Hell yeah, the irregular. That's why I was shooting in between the airliners. So, anyhow, things were happy until something happened. I wasn't satisfied with these engines anymore. Got to build something bigger now. So, right about when I'm about 13, I come up with this idea of building a new type of engine. It's called a fusion magnetic containment engine. Now, most people really go, "Oh, that's nice." Well, let me give you some appreciation, okay? Imagine if I said, let's take a hydrogen warhead, like 100 megaton, that if it went off right here in this room with us, you won't have to worry about it. But people about 2 miles away, it'll blow a hole 2 miles in diameter and 1,000 feet deep. It'll raise the temperature to about 100 million degrees centigrade. Now we're going to take all that force and power, and we're now going to put it inside, appropriately, we're going to put it inside a bottle and contain it. Right, sure. So that's exactly what this engine does. Now, how can it? This sounds stupid. It can't possibly be true. And that's 3D rocket scientist people tell me that. I'm like, "Oh yeah? Well, check this out. There's only one thing that we know of that can bend light and space and time out in space, and only one thing we know of that can swallow a sun that disappears, and that's called a black hole." And thanks to a little guy named Stephen Hawkins, we were able to come up with quantum mechanics, in which he now proved that these theories are now fact. Well, but you got to know something. You know what year this is? It's 1967. It will be 20-some years, 22 years before you'll hear the term quantum mechanics. At age 7, I was working quantum mechanics, doing it all with the math and papers. So I'm working on the mathematics of this thing, and it gets a little strange. because I can't figure out some of the theorems on this thing. And I can't build an algorithm model. So let me give you an appreciation of environment, okay? There are no faxes, no cellulars, no pagers, no beepers, no power books, no personal computers, no CD-ROMs, no cable television, no microwave ovens, and it'll be another 10 years before Texas Instruments builds the first handheld calculator. All I have is pencil and paper and chalkboards and a thing called a slide ruler. Anybody remember those? I see some hands. Well, anyway, which, by the way, I went at a yard sale. Do you remember the giant yellow one that was in a classroom? They could pull that thing around. I found one for $5. I got that thing hanging over my shop. And they go, what is that? Well, I know how old you are now. So, especially when girls ask me that, watch out, I'll get you. So, I'm working on this stuff, and I can't do the calculations. It's just too taxing. It's too far out for the algorithms to hold the model and contain this field. Because what I want to do is build an artificial black hole. I can do that with dual cyclotrons, and I came up with a particle accelerator. Well, when the feeding system of the plasma drives, I don't want to go into it too detailed, but what that does is it creates an electromagnetic force field containment area that is the same intensity of a black hole. What does the black holes do? They swallow suns and they disappear and you never see them again. Obviously, you have a containment vessel for that power. Works pretty good, only if you can get the loop to close, and I couldn't. So my science teacher, could you imagine having me for a kid for a science class? I'm in 7th grade at the time. He looks at this work and goes, what is this? And I said, I'm working on my math on this rocket. Well, see, they dropped me out of algebra because I couldn't do it. And so he's looking at this. He goes, you want to work some of this for me? I said, sure, look at this. And he's going, geez. So can I borrow this for a minute? So he borrowed it and went to Ohio State University. I'm in Mount Vernon, Ohio at this town.